Think Different Nation is brought to you by InvestOut.net, where we connect homeowners who know that their homes could sell for more if renovated, with investors who are interested in adding that value at no cost to you. Once the home's renovated, you, as the homeowner, sell the home, and the investors make their profit from the increased value of the sale.
Learn more at InvestOut.net.
Look deep, Josh, it's there. It's 12 moves away, but it's there. You've got him. Don't move until you see it.
I can't see it.
Don't move until you see it.
I can't see it.
Don't move until you see it.
I'm sorry, Dad.
He's got it.
He's got it. How do you know he's got it?
He's got it.
You're listening to the Think Differently podcast by innovator Ty Glover.
Have you ever thought about the importance of connections? Or more specifically, about being able to make connections? You know, it seems like such a simple thing. I mean, some of the obvious connections, they come in the form of what Oprah Winfrey would refer to as an aha moment, or rather, a moment of sudden insight or discovery. Insights, according to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is having the capacity to gain an accurate and deeply intuitive understanding of a person's or thing. But it's impossible to gain insight without actually collecting additional information via our 5+ senses, because they prompt those discoveries. They prompt that extra discovery and those additional insights. You see, it's all about our ability to be able to connect the pieces of a puzzle, and oftentimes only after we receive new information or we process the information that we do have in a different way, then can we actually have those moments of discovery, those aha moments. One of the most important questions a big thinker must be able to understand is the concept of time. Not the thought of 60 minutes an hour or 24 hours in a day or 365 days in a year, but rather that man first left Africa 40,000 years ago, or about 900 grandmothers. Now think about it. That's your mother, and then her mother, and then her mother's mother, on out for 900 iterations of that path. They say as few as 18 people made the journey out of Africa. That's potentially 18 people who left to populate all the other corners of the world during a period of time when there was dramatic climactic changes taking place in Africa, and those who stayed oftentimes would have died. There were more than 9 other different types of humans who came and went before us some 5.7 million years ago, but we're the only ones who survived. And again, only about 18 of us actually left Africa, inch by inch, the children becoming the settlers of all the other continents. And if you can grasp this concept, then you also can very easily understand the fact that we could have just as easily died off as every other early human. The end of humans. Now, when we think in terms of scale, we need to consider that we, modern humans, evolved into our current form some 200,000 years ago in Africa, or about 5,000 maternal grandmothers. Again, think about it. That's you, your mother, her mother, that's grandmother 1, on throughout 5,000 different grandmothers into the past. That's about 200,000 years ago when we were first becoming us within Africa. Why do you need to know this? Because the most important thing you can ever understand is that time changes everything, always. But when it happens at such a slow pace, it's impossible to see it. I mean, it's like watching hair grow. The change is undetectable, but nonetheless, the change is occurring. But unfortunately, we don't consciously work to make connections. Reality can appear implausible to us, unfathomable. Those connections are the most important part of understanding not just the bigger picture, but any picture that presents itself as a successful you. Whenever I speak with someone about evolution, they say, "Do you mean to tell me that you actually think we came from monkeys?" they automatically jump to a belief that scientists are suggesting that we evolved from chimpanzees. Why do they do this? It's because they can't scale in their possibilities. Because their personal beliefs close off considerations of any of the other pieces to the puzzle that are required to fill in the gaps of their understanding. In truth, no modern anthropologist has ever stated in the history of humans that we evolved from chimpanzees. I mean, if the facts suggested it, then there would have been no issue in stating it as such. It's just that the facts don't suggest it. So, what scientists know is that somewhere in the area of 5.8 million years ago, or about 145,000 maternal grandmothers, again, that's you, your mother, her mother being that first grandmother, going out to 145,000 grandmothers into the past, a primate that was to become the modern chimpanzee, and a primate that was to become us, shared the same maternal grandmother. Now be careful with the word human, because the word human in Latin translates to homo. And there were more than 9 other different types of Homo species, including Homo sapiens, which is us, wise human, or Homo erectus, which is human that stands erect, or Homo habilis, which is handyman that is human because he used tools. We just happen to get the name Homo sapien, or human, that is wise. But this means those two sisters, who looked identical in every sense of the word, wound up finding a mate, and that combined gene of the soon-to-be human pair and the soon-to-be chimpanzee pair had slight differences in their genes that were probably less noticeable than the amount of hair that grows on a human within a minute's time. She's what anthropologists call mitochondrial DNA, because she was the one who started it all. And the continuation of slight changes led to the next grandmother, and the continuation of another slight change, and so on, for about 140,000 grandmothers until we reached modern man. But during those 140,000 maternal grandmothers, our cousins would have also included Homo neanderthalis, who existed from about 9,000 to about 900 grandmothers ago, and Homo erectus, who emerged about 47,000 grandmothers ago till about 2,700 maternal grandmothers. Are you making a connection? Remember, time changes everything. Or consider what happened 50 million years ago with a small fish swimming near the bottom of the Indian Ocean, and he dies and he slowly falls to the bottom only to be covered by sand. And that's where he stays. And he stays, and as the weeks turn into months, turn into years, time moves on. And during that time, that same period of time, the land is changing at a slow rate of 2.5 inches per year. You see, 2 tectonic plates, the Indian, Australian, and the Eurasian plates, they came together at the bottom of the ocean, and there was no place for them to go but up. So scientists call this uplifting. And in each year, the 2 plates came together and they created that uplift pushing, and the land moved up by 2.5 inches year by year by year. And now that fish has long since become part of the rock, resulting in just a fossilized skeletal remain of that which once was. And time moved on. Now, watching the earth move 2.5 inches per year is literally like watching hair grow over the period of a second and expecting to see actual movement. It's not going to happen like that no matter how hard you or slow you try to look. It's not going to happen. But when you consider time, that's when scale really comes into view, and that's when you can really more easily make connections necessary to understand its impact on change. You see, over the course of those 50 million years, of those 2.5 inches of growth each year, that small fish, it rose from the bottom of the ocean to a point where it's reached the highest peak on Earth, Mount Everest. And it stands now nearly 30,000 feet above sea level at its highest point in the Himalayan mountain range. That's the power of time, and that change is inevitable. So, Is it still so difficult to make the connection of what change is possible across the course of 140,000 maternal grandmothers whose bodies underwent strong pressures to adapt to the changing environment? The ability for you to be able to make these connections can help you to increase your opportunities exponentially. But what if you had a physical impairment that positioned you for a life of, let's just say, the atypical or not the norm? Are you therefore less capable of achieving your goals in life? I would argue that depending on how you look at your options, your position, and whether you're able to make the right connections, that your differences can be your greatest instinctive advantages, because it gives you an opportunity to turn a process of minimizing a negative into a goal of maximizing a positive, and you can truly differentiate yourself as a result. Depending on your orientation to the question, you can actually see answers that no one could ever have possibly thought of, and that's a tremendous opportunity for you to maximize your greatest. There was once a young lady who epitomized making the connection, beginning at one specific aha moment in her life. You see, she was born to a well-to-do family, and at the age of roughly 19 months, she fell sick from what doctors now believe to be scarlet fever. Now, she was able to survive the sickness, but she lost her sight and her hearing, leaving her family unaware of how to actually connect with her. I mean, the child was truly a hellion if you look at it from the standpoint of the parents. From her parents' standpoint, she was truly a smart kid. They just didn't know how to connect with her. I mean, think about it. Imagine you lost both your sight and your hearing. Could you survive? Could you rebound back to the original self, the original you, and adapt to the new life in which you found yourself in? Most likely, yes, but because you could speak. Communicating in sentences and learning Braille and sign language to understand incoming communications is what you would be able to do. But what about if you're only 19 months old when this happened to you? So you never learned how to speak or understand words. You never learned how to write. And at this point, it's impossible to know whether in fact her brain was able to even retain the images that she had experienced up to her 19 short months in life. My belief is that nature abhors a vacuum, so undoubtedly there was something there, but what was it filled with? We have 5 basic instincts that we use to take in and communicate information, and the most impactful would be our vision and our hearing. What's left? Smell, touch, and taste, all of which lost its impact on modern man some 200,000 years earlier when we moved from instinct to think. So here's this little hellion running around the farm at 4 years of age, getting older and not knowing how to plug into the world. And it's a good thing that she was from a well-to-do family, because most people, they would have been lost, and many more would have been placed into a hospital for the insane. But her parents were different. They had means, and at one point, they were even able to take her to see Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone, to see if there was some type of device that could be created to assist the family in communicating with their daughter. But nothing came from those visits. She and Alexander Graham Bell did connect later on in life, and Mr. Bell became her benefactor throughout the last years of Helen's life. But at the age of 6, Helen's parents, they made a decision to hire someone who had also experienced a complete loss of sight at one point in her life, and this made all the difference in making a connection. You see, connections were possible even with someone who had lost 3 out of the 4 senses. But how do you make it? As a young girl, she refused to learn Braille in her young life because she just couldn't understand her caregiver's intentions. Surely she was thinking, you're going to be putting my fingers on a series of raised dots and I'm supposed to understand what this means to me and why I have to feel it? I mean, how do you get someone to complete the puzzle when they can't see the pieces? But her caregiver knew how, though, because she was also blind, and therefore the gap between the parts needing to be connected were a lot smaller. But what was the critical part that needed to be connected within these pieces? The connection was finally made when the young girl put 2 things together. At one point in many of the drama-filled days that they had experienced together, her teacher began to, once again, drawing the letters of the word water in the palm of her hand, and while running the water over her hands at the water spout. And this and many other tactics had been tried in the past, but for some reason, everything kind of came together when this one aha moment occurred. At that moment, she knew they were communicating. The teacher was providing a proverbial Rosetta Stone, or a bridge, a guide for learning. And they got it. They connected it. That moment changed her life back in 1883, and the lady in question continued to study. She went on to achieve her degrees. She became a social and political activist and was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1962 by President JFK. She also touched more presidential faces than anyone else in the world had ever done. And still today. That young lady was Helen Keller, and she was truly amazing and truly worked to maximize her greatest life. But in truth, her sickness happened so early in her life that her physiology was able to rewire itself in support of her remaining senses of taste and smell. You see, sight is the most expensive sense of all of our senses because the energy and the brain capacity required of our bodies to take in that data that we visually collect and process it into images that our brain can understand, it takes a lot of energy and processing power, more than any of our other senses. The ability to feel hyper-detailed textures, such as Braille, and translate those tactile stimuli into information that can be translated into meaning, while powerful, doesn't require anywhere near the processing capacity that's required with sight. So when your brain no longer has to process imagery, that processing capacity is diverted into maximizing the operations of our other remaining senses. It doesn't increase the strength of our remaining senses, though. This is what scientists believe. Now, a sighted person who loses their hearing, well, they won't begin to see through walls. What scientists have found is that the loss of one sense could increase the dimensions through which one could experience the remaining senses. For example, a person who becomes blind doesn't physically get better ears, and therefore their hearing won't necessarily improve. But what happens is that nature finds a way. And if the loss occurs at a young age where the body and the brain is still developing, then the brain, it can literally rewire itself to capitalize on what remains. For the man who loses the sight, he may begin to develop a heightened sense of knowing the directions from which sound is emerging, an increased ability to differentiate between sounds and voices. And if he's tapping into his instinctive advantage, then he'll also lean into that ability to process the sound in different ways and to see where it can be leveraged in other maximizing opportunities. The loss of sight would leave him more brain capacity available to processing the remaining information being received from the other senses, and that's where his competitive advantage can emerge with his instinctive advantage. Because if you look at a person and you see their senses and through which they're operating, and they're not available or they're not aware of your enhanced senses in other areas, it gives you an advantage in this scenario. So, Helen was truly an amazing young lady who really changed the way the world looked at people with, let's just say, differences. She was truly maximizing her greatness. Because even at her late age of development, she was determined to use the rest of her life seeking to learn and grow. German philosopher Nietzsche believed that one must give value to their existence by behaving as though they know that their entire existence is a work of art. That philosophy of life is how the greatest achievers live theirs, by living as though they were painting their own masterpiece. They think consciously and they give purpose. They make the connection. Do you know what your instinctive advantages are? On any given day, we're influenced by more than 37 different instinctive tendencies or inclinations without even knowing it. But the difference between the people who are painting their lives as their work of art, their masterpiece, and just the average person is that the people who consciously leverage their senses to absorb the information around them are the ones who can understand when they're prompted by fear to act in a detrimental way, can find new senses through which they can capitalize on their curious self, and begin to better understand which one of their tendencies drive what's positive and negative in their lives. My name is Ty Glover, and I think differently. Think Different Nation isn't about presenting new ideas as facts, but rather connecting sound facts with facts and extrapolating out the possibilities. There are two hypotheses or theories, principled and unprincipled. And a principled theory is fact-based, It's scientific backing, it's based on research performed by career professionals, and it's backed by evidence, peer-reviewed, and the dissenting opinions are also included within the analysis. And the great thing is that they strengthen each year with new evidence as it appears. Many facts started as beliefs, but were later proven to be factual. The theory of evolution is a principled fact. An unprincipled theory, on the other hand, is a theory that is belief-based. Religions are created as stories and passed down for the millennium. They are not subject to change because stories cannot be rewritten. Instinctive advantages are also unprincipled. I'm not a psychologist, an anthropologist, or anyone working within a scientific background or discipline, and therefore I don't possess the degrees to be concerned about presenting what I see as obvious when you connect the pieces. But as I consider the possibilities, if I were a member of the scientific community, then I might not even have the ability to be able to scale across time, space, and discipline, to be able to make the connections. Because I most likely would not have an inclination towards business and towards entrepreneurship, towards innovation. And my orientation most likely would have been coming from a different direction. But while the trees might exist, I might only see the forest. Thank you for listening to my podcast on Helen Keller and making the connections. Consensus driven.